Husband and wife Richard and Stacey Schoeck were planning on having a romantic evening on Valentine's Day of 2010. This was meant to be a little something special where they would exchange their own handwritten Valentine cards in a park, or at least that's what Stacey told her husband Richard. Richard, being a family man, was enthusiastic about all of this. He drove to their agreed-upon meetup spot in Belton Bridge Park in Lula, Georgia. The spot meant something to them as they had found the desolate area when they were both spending time together motorcycling, thinking it was a nice place. There was still no sign of Stacey yet, so Richard waited. Then, a man he had never seen before began approaching him. Before he could react, the man pulled out a gun and shot Richard 5 times before fleeing the scene. Soon, his wife Stacey arrived, finding his body next to his truck, and frantically called the police. The cops then arrived and took Stacey in for questioning later that night. Stacey told the police that she was taking care of her elderly grandmother at the time. Her and some family members would take turns tending to her. So, Stacey was ruled out as the one who pulled the trigger. She then admitted that she had been having an affair with another man for the past 6 to 7 months. The man she had been secretly seeing was Juan Reyes, a coworker of Stacey's. She mentioned that it was getting pretty serious, so suspicion of Juan being the prime suspect began. Though, after talking to Juan, he had a solid alibi, having been spending the night with his ex-wife and kids at the time. His ex-wife obviously saddened about the news because she thought they were working on improving their relationship, would ultimately confirm his story, leaving the investigators at a dead end. The investigation sparked extreme interest within the department because none of the clues pointed to some random encounter, robbery, or anything spontaneous. Instead, everything seemed to be planned. The gunshot wounds were brutal and way too over the top. Aside from Stacey and Richard's 2 cars, there was a third set of tire tracks left behind. Detectives discovered that this third vehicle arrived at the park before Richard, and left after Richard had parked, meaning this whole thing was probably predetermined. Someone was waiting for Richard that night. The only question was who and why. Investigators were stumped because nothing was really adding up. One day, Detective Dan Franklin, involved in the case, received a call from one of Stacey's coworkers in the IT department at the medical center she worked at. The guy found something really suspicious and odd. He was just clearing junk files of employee emails when he noticed that in the days prior to Valentine's Day, the day everything happened, Stacey's email had been completely wiped clean. It wasn't an automated process or anything of the sort. Stacey herself deliberately deleted all of these emails for some reason. Fortunately for the police, she had no idea that everything was automatically backed up. Detectives soon obtained a warrant for access to the deleted emails. They found emails between Stacey and her bank requesting for a money transfer to a coworker of hers. The reasoning for this transfer was home repairs, totaling roughly $10,000. The police visited this coworker named Lenitra Ross. The woman confirmed that the money given to her was for these supposed home repairs. This lead seemingly ended right here, so this was another dead end for the detectives. Though luckily, soon enough, Detective Franklin would get another call. This time, it was from Stacey's cousin. They mentioned that during that gruesome night, her grandparents' car was gone. This made no sense to the family because nobody ever owned up to taking it, and everyone was confused as to what really happened or where it went. Finally, having another lead, investigators did everything they could to track the location of this vehicle. They eventually found the car, though they found Stacey was involved. She had just sold the car, which was weird considering no one in her family knew why she would even do that. After all, it was her grandparents' car, and there was nothing wrong with it. When investigators inspected the car, they matched the tire tracks of this car to the one that left tire track marks at the park that night. And bingo, there was a close match with this same exact brand of tires. Suspicion immediately went to Stacey. Although she had an alibi for her physical location, detectives understood that she could still have played a role in what happened to Richard. The aim now was to find the driver of that vehicle. Detectives then requested information about all calls that occurred that night from a local cell tower in that area. Detective Franklin matched the numbers from Stacey's phone contacts and a specific number that was called in that area right around the time that Richard left the house heading to the park. This number belonged to Reggie Coleman, who was on a call with Lenitra Ross, the same woman who Stacey apparently paid $10,000 for home repairs. There was a clear triangle being formed of connection in this case. Reggie Coleman was a personal trainer in the area. He often carried out training sessions for employees in Stacey's workplace. They connected calls that had occurred from Reggie to Lenitra and Lenitra to Stacey. These all happened on the night of Valentine's Day. The same night everything happened. All three were immediately arrested. 7 months later, Stacey finally admitted to everything she had done. Her reasoning was apparently because she believed that Richard had her sons. Except this wasn't true at all. Her kids were surprised when she said this because it made no sense and none of them could even back up this story. It was a completely false and made-up story made by her to probably try to gain some level of support or understanding for what she had done. Later, in court, when prosecutors challenged her on this story, they questioned why she would leave her kids with Richard frequently if he was this alleged monster. Stacey, of course, had no reasonable answer. When Richard's sister came to see Stacey while she was behind bars, she admitted that her true intentions were to get Richard before he divorced her, in fear of losing custody of her kids. Before all of this, years earlier, Richard had adopted her 3 children so they could have a father figure in their lives. So, in Stacey's eyes, if they were to get divorced, she was afraid of him getting custody of the kids. To spare her own life, Stacey would agree to testify against both Reggie and Lenitra, explaining the whole plan in court. She was still sentenced to life in prison without parole, and due to Lenitra's involvement as the middleman, or middlewoman per se, and as the person who connected Stacey to the hitman, she was given a life sentence without parole. Regarding Lenitra's original payment for all of this, Stacey would give her access to a home the family owned, charging her for rent and home repairs, while Reggie, or Mr. Results, would be paid $10,000. It was found that Reggie was a personal trainer by day and part-time hitman by night. He conducted all of his unofficial business, if you will, under the name of Mr. Results. After hearing about Stacey's wishes, Lenitra would contact her on and off boyfriend, Reggie, or Mr. Results, to take the job. He never really talked directly to Stacey, as most of the communication occurred with Lenitra. They only ever discussed the plan face-to-face once when all 3 were present. After the plan was concocted, Stacey gave Mr. Results her grandparents' car, and he was off. According to Stacey, he screwed everything up. The plan was supposed to be to make the whole thing look like a robbery and make it quick, though ironically, Mr. Results didn't exactly give the results Stacey wanted. He shot Richard 5 times and didn't steal anything at all. Similar to both Stacey and Lenitra, Reggie was also sentenced to life without parole. Everyone else in their family loved Richard, describing him as a true family man who treated the kids as if they were his own. He was passionate about the things he did and cared about the people he surrounded himself with. His passing really shocked and hurt everyone in the family, except Stacey, of course. Stacey and Richard would have a fight or argument every now and then, but not any more than a typical married couple would have. Richard even thought they were working on improving their marriage at the time. Everyone around them knew this and still described their marriage as happy and loving, which makes all of this that much more confusing. It was also found that Richard had a life insurance policy worth roughly $500,000. It still isn't exactly confirmed what Stacey's true intention was. It was most likely the life insurance money, but Stacey herself still hasn't given a true and believable reason. Despite whatever her reasoning would be, there was no understandable motive for what she did. Richard was loved by almost everyone in the community, and closure was finally given to friends and family who lost someone they truly cared about, and someone irreplaceable in the community.